Greetings everyone, this is Don951 and Mekkah.
Hi.
And you are watching Chapter 25 of my Fire Emblem 7 Hector Hard Mode 0% Gross playthrough. Chapter 25 kicks off a series of mid to late game chapters in which we take a much more relaxed pace because there are some limitations that force us to slow down a lot. This is because in 2 of the chapters, it's a defend objective that we can't shorten, and in the other 2 chapters, it features a recruitable unit that shows up fashionably late, so we have to dilly-dally until we can recruit them. In a non-full recruitment playthrough, this chapter is actually quite interesting because it has a unique objective that forces us to split up all of our units in a way that kind of stretches them a little bit thin, but just barely enough to accomplish the objectives. But because we have to wait around until turn 6 to recruit Farina, this is the perfect map to grind up some of our units. Take Bartre for example, remember him? This is the opportunity for us to start training him up again. We have to get him to promote to level 5, and we have to do it quickly because we're running out of time.
So Bartre, he was force deployed in the early game, but at some point we just kind of ran out of unit slots for him. All the mid-game chapters, they were kind of balls to the wall as LTC, and there was no real room for like a 5-move liability like him to get kills, but in a more relaxed chapter like this, it's a perfect time for him to at least get him a little closer to level 10. We can even make him do some enemy phase combat, because we can make liberal use of Ninja Strays, and the enemies in this chapter are so slow that even someone like him doesn't get doubled despite his base 3 speed. Lucius is kind of a similar case. He is easier to feed kills to than Bartre because he has accurate 2 range, so we can for example hide him behind some more tanky units, but he's still just so fragile that it's hard to justify deploying him, in most of the maps before this at least. This chapter is also a great opportunity for Kanas to work on his staff rank. It feels like he's been at E rank forever, but this chapter is great for him, because it gives him 5 turns of basically guaranteed healing, especially since Bartre is so bad at dodging that he's always going to be damaged at the start of player phase. So the main objective of this map is to seize the 3 forts in the 3 corners of the map. The bottom left is mostly pirates using steel axes, although there are some hand axes and a sword slayer mixed in. The top left is a bunch of weighed down steel lance cavaliers, and in the top right there is a lot of monks that cannot do any damage to anyone with a semblance of resistance, and they even get one-rounded by Fiora using a javelin, despite Fiora's stats being subpar for this point in the game, so that shows how much of a threat they are.
Between the exceptionally weak monks and the pirates, the Pegasus Knights, and the Cavaliers that are all weighed down to what it feels like almost nothing by the weaponry, this chapter really epitomizes the premise of quantity over quality, much like the rest of Hector Hard Mode, but in a way even more so because the enemies here just feel so weak compared to before. And part of the reason why is because if you look in the game's unused data, there is an alternate enemy deployment in this chapter, which features 11 more starting enemies. It replaces all the Pegasus Knights with Wyvern Riders, and there's like, for example, a sniper on the way to Pascal, there's a droppable Silver Axe by the Warrior Boss, and there's stealable Night Crest and Angelic Robe. It's speculated that that's the intended Hector Hard Mode enemy loadout because it's pretty standard in this game to have slight variations in all the difficulty modes for like all the map features. And this is one of the only chapters in the game where Hector Normal Mode and Hector Hard Mode have the same exact enemy data. So definitely would have been a trickier experience, probably not as conducive to training Bartre, although we still would have tried. But in a way, I'm kind of glad that the enemies in this map are so pathetic because it makes this grinding a lot easier.
So Hawkeye is making his way across the lake towards where Fiora is very slowly. This is because the lake tiles give a greater movement penalty to berserkers than river tiles do, but Donna doing it like this is kind of unusual. Normally, players like to take their chosen Pegasus Knight towards the top right of the map and just bonk the bishop boss and get it over with, but this time it seems more delayed for some reason. One of these reasons is that Fiora went to a far point of the map to block a pair of pirate spawns that would threaten either her or the Elysian Whip village that we want to get. The pirates are much harder for her to deal with than the monks are because they have weapon triangle advantage over her unless she's using an axe reaver. So in this case, it's better to just block them from spawning entirely. Now, in all my years of commentating Donon's playthroughs, I have never seen him move through a map so slowly. And you might wonder, why isn't he at least moving towards the objectives that we need to seize, so that he can do that in a timely fashion when Farina appears? The answer to that is the reinforcement zones in this chapter. There's one around each seizable gate, and if you enter it, you will get a huge amount of spawns depending on which it is. The bottom left only spawns 1 wave of 5 pirates, which is easy enough to get past, but the top left spawns 5 waves of 5 cavaliers, 3 of them on top of forts that make it rather hard to get past, and in the top right spawns 5 waves of 4 monks in formation. And honestly, dealing with all these enemies is a huge waste of time, and there are plenty of enemies starting on the map for us to kill with Bartra and Lucius, so we don't have to worry about that.
Yeah, I've definitely witnessed enough draft races to vicariously experience how frustrating those reinforcements can be, because if you don't have a plan to punch through them, sitting through 5 waves of reinforcements and mowing them all down, although technically not that challenging, it does waste a huge amount of time watching all those HP bars go to 0, watching the EXP bars go up, watching all the level up screens. We're sending Heath back down to the bottom left to deal with the warrior fort. Along with him is Wrath, who we're showing off some of his more generous terrain penalties compared to other mounted units. He only takes a 2 movement penalty from Forest compared to the 3 that Paladins normally face, and this allows him to advance at a faster clip. At the beginning of turn 5 player phase, Farina shows up on the map. She's positioned next to Hector, so you might think that Hector's going to just talk to her and recruit her over. But the unfortunate thing is that you can't actually interact with Farina in any way. You have to wait for her to interact with you. And she is not a same turn NPC reinforcement like Fiora was, so we have to wait 1 extra turn, and that extends this chapter for 1 more turn compared to if she were a same turn NPC reinforcement. You'd think that there would be something in place for her sisters to have a talk conversation with her and be like, "Hey, what's up, sis? Fancy seeing you here. What the heck are you doing here?" But they didn't even plan for that.
The appearance of Farina has lit a fire underneath the butts of both Don and his units as they realize, oh, we're actually in an LTC playthrough, we need to hurry up and get to the gates that we're supposed to be seizing. This is particularly interesting and difficult in the case of the team that's in charge of seizing the gate and has Pascal on it. For that reason, we have used Ninja's Grace on Marcus and then moved him and Isadora in range of both the reinforcement zone and the boss himself. Isadora has the Lance Reaver equipped, so she's not in danger of getting hit by Pascal, and Marcus is protected by Ninja's Grace and being at full health in general, so he's very hard to kill for the Ballistas and the Steel Lance Cavaliers. From here, Isadora is in position to take out the enemy Cavalier that will appear on the middle fort, and that will leave the path clear for Marcus to seize on the subsequent turn. In the upper right, Fiora moved in such a way to bait the enemy Pegasus Knights into moving towards the right. If we let them move left instead, one of them would end up blocking a spot that Hawkeye needs to be on in order to attack the boss at 2 range. You might think he has the space to attack from a different square, but the appearance of 4 enemy monks in front of him would make that impossible, so we have to do this maneuver this way instead.
The Bishop at least is smart by remaining on the space that he's supposed to defend, whereas Pascal greedily runs off and attacks us. And I know that some players think that it's better boss design to have them actually mobile and threatening, but you'll see here that it's just a trivial matter to lure him away from the gate and not bother having to deal with him at all. We're engaged in a long, unskippable talk conversation between Hector and Farina, and it's unskippable because it requires a confirmation dialogue about whether or not we want to spend 20,000 gold to dump the blue paint on her. I know that some ranked players are going to be rolling in their graves, because not only did we have to sell Dark's promotion item, thereby losing 25,000 gold in assets, but then we spent another 20,000 gold for a unit that, in gross playthroughs at least, I don't think is worth the cost, because even though her base stats look good, they are a little deceiving in a way. She has 14 speed, but in reality she's weighed down by any good weapon that we want her to use, so practically she often isn't even as fast as Heath, who isn't notable for being fast. He has the same speed as Marcus right now. And Farina's other shortcomings are notably that she's weaker, and she also has pretty low base HP, which can really hurt in some circumstances.
Farina does have a couple of things going for her. For one, she is at a base level that allows her to promote right away instead of having to train her a little bit. And she also has a high base resistance, which comes in handy in a couple of chapters coming up. Unfortunately, there's not much of an opportunity for her to contribute to a lot of main objectives, because a lot of the chapters coming up are like this one where there's a turn floor, and there's just no way for her to speed it up. Now, the gates we have to seize in this chapter are interesting in that you don't have to perform an action as you're about to seize them. For example, Wrath is able to attack a pirate as he's standing on top of one, and Fiora is doing something even more interesting by visiting the Elysium Whip village and then cantering on top of the gate, seizing it with no action at all other than waiting. And that is going to be chapter 25, completed in 6 turns. We will see you next time.
Bye-bye.